Greetings, dear viewers, and welcome to my fan commentary on episode 3 of Power Rangers Time Force, Something to Fight For, where we're introduced to the Time Flyers to form the two formations of the Time Force Megazord, and I will rebuttal into talking about all the changes this episode had been made following the attacks of 9/11, because this was one of the many episodes that they had to revision and revise and re-edit due to 9/11. And this was our first episode where we actually see the villains in the cryo prison as their base of operations. Rancic's vile serums, which he'll use to cure his mutations from rapidly happening for the rest of the season. And this is technically part of the sort of three-part pilot to the season, because if you condense Force from the Future parts 1 and 2 with this is basically actually a three-part beginning to the season. At this point, this was when the 4 remaining Rangers were still living in, desolation with the destruction of the pieces of the time ship. And, that's kind of complicated. How can Katie hold that chunk of the ship's debris so high? Oh, yeah, that's right. She's the strongest of the group. And we're even introduced to the Time Jet, which will be sort of like their equivalent to a jet jammer that can actually have all 5 Rangers ride on it. Eventually when we get to the end of the season, Captain Logan is already going to be an afterthought as we learn who was the real superior behind all of this. They can maintain in the opening credits for some of these episodes the time shadow running on top of those buildings. But although in the opening credits for this episode, they replaced the Q-Rex in this episode at the end when you see Jonathan Zachar's name as a producer. But in the original edit of the episode, they had the time shadow on the Twin Towers still intact in the opening credits. I don't know why for the first episode, Force from the Future Part 1, they still kept that intact for some reason. If only they were paying more attention to the edits. Now, I know that this was not in Time Ranger when Tatsuya was going ahead toe-to-toe with Lila. But Wes and Nadira's little fight in the bank was subtle. Only in this version of the episode, since they adapted the second episode of Time Ranger, but they had to do this whole entire plot completely all American. Knowing you don't have the morpher because, again, Jen and the others took it from you, so you just going off just doing things on your own. No wonder this is why hence the title of this episode, Something to Fight For. Fighting for what? And I don't know what's up with Gluto and the big giant lollipop. I really don't. I gotta admit that of all of the actors from the post Zordon era, I think the Time Force cast really nailed their fight choreography unmorphed, unlike most of the cast from this era. Nadira's Lady Deathstrike nails. And it's just like with here's the thing. Just like with Trakina, Nadira would complain about her fingernails being broken. Well, this was only once in this episode for her, but when we had Trakina 2 seasons ago, it happened like 2 or 3 times her fingernails got broken. It's more acceptable with Nadira with that, but not with Trakina back in Lost Galaxy. This moment with Wes and Jen, in particular, when Jen told Wes to stay out of their way, knowing that this is their mission, knowing Wes doesn't know what he's getting himself into. This was not in Time Ranger when Yuri and Tatsuya, again, Yuri never told Tatsuya any of this stuff. This was only a Wes and Jen thing. This was not with Tatsuya and Yuri and the Sentai. I remember 20 years ago, again, when I was watching these Power Rangers when they initially aired, I just wasn't fond of Jen at first. I mean, I get it because, this was the first season having the Pink Ranger being a leader, because at first I wasn't fond of that. But now I start to open up in why she is the leader of the team. And then, well, again, this picks up immediately after the last episode when Jen took Wes's Morpher away, because, again, he was only a candidate just to activate the Morpher, but knowing that the Rangers need a Red Ranger, they can't go after Ransik's army right away without a Red Ranger, because I know that Jen can handle dealing with, Jen and her team can handle the mutants on their own without Wes. It's like Wes can't do crap. Maybe it's because, again, I think there's a reason for this, because Jen is still hung strong with the stages of grief over the death of her fiance. We hardly ever see a villain's father kiss their daughter's hand when a broken nail. Because again, unlike Scorpius and Trakina, this is one of the reasons why I prefer Ransik and Nadira, villainous father and daughter duo, better this season as opposed with the latter 2 seasons ago. At least Ransik has more, kindred for his own daughter, and fatherly love for her too. Speaking of the other father figure of this season, Wes's father, he wants Wes to show up at this meeting, but he doesn't do that, because what I like about Wes as a Red Ranger is that, unlike most of the majority of characters in this franchise, oh yeah, this was a B-roll shot when Jen told him about something. What did he have to fight for? That part, that was a B-roll shot. But anyway, back to when you got characters who are rich and spoiled in fiction. See, especially in the Power Rangers universe, most majority of spoiled rich people, they're usually stuck up, hung strong, and vapid and cold. But when you got a character like Wes, despite he comes from a rich and wealthy upbringing and background, I get his father wants his own son to, follow his footsteps. No, what I like about Red Rangers like Wes is that he doesn't want to follow in his father's footsteps. He wants to make his own choices. He's his own man now. He's old enough and capable of doing his own thing. He may be rich and spoiled, but he has a heart of gold and wants to do the right thing. Of course, we got to bring up the whole, the fact Alex was Wes is descended from Jen and them's time in the year 3000. And Trip, what I also liked about Time Force is also Wes's friendship with Trip, because Trip is, the heart of the team. Because, it seems like we got 2 hearts of the team. Well, how I would describe the team in general, like Trip is the heart of the team, Katie's the strength, Jen is the lead of the team. Lucas is, well, as much as I don't really care for Lucas, he's like the resilient, such of the team, and I don't know about Wes in terms of where he stands. Like, I wouldn't say chosen one because he's not a chosen. There's no chosen one narrative in the season. It's just what I do like about this season of Power Rangers is that they're not like the Galaxy Rangers or the Lightspeed Rangers. Like Lightspeed, they are from a government organization, but from way eons and generations ahead of its time with its technology and where they come from compared to Lightspeed last season. I didn't say anything. Quoting what's his name from the Penguins of Madagascar with that, you didn't see anything. But again, when Wes talks to Jen about, how Wes found out now about why Jen is the way she is, he knows now about, her fiance being supposedly dead thanks to Rancic. And I know in the early episodes, there was a reason she took the morpher from him. She just probably just didn't want no one to replace her fiance, who was the Red Ranger from her time. You can see, once we get to the harbor, but that's only via the Sentai footage of Time Ranger with those cop cars. You can see the Hyundai logo on some of the cargo boxes because Hyundai is a Japanese car manufacturer. Split screen morph for the four Rangers and only one solo morph for Red. I used to have the Time Jet as a toy once. I wish I still had it though. It's impressive. It operates as a jet for the five Rangers when flying on it to get to their destination. And then when they have the Time Force Megazord later, it of course becomes the blaster for when the Megazord's on mode blue and not mode red. Because despite the futuristic theme of the series, the season's theme for the Megazords for the season are flyer jets because future and the technology that they have. And I gotta give credit for Time Force is that while I like its visual aesthetics with the futuristic vibes going for the season, it makes sense for them to get jet flyers as the theme for their mech and for their Zord. Yeah, DNA patches. Well, every single one of the mutants except Frax's robots have them. It's a method to make the monster grow for the season. This is where we get a bit of heavy post 9/11 editing. Once the Rangers duck into cover and get to the corner of the two buildings, there's of course that deleted scene we saw from the Next Time on Power Ranger segment from the previous episode included here in this edit. But in the original edit of the episode, Jatara just blows up a building that was just standing right by him, and he blows it up. But they replace it in the re-edit, place the scene that was cut from the original broadcast version of this episode with the Rangers ducking from the explosion, which we finally get to see in this re-edit because, well, who would have thought that? It seemed like, is it just me, or did this season actually foreshadow 9/11 with its, the stuff that it was, that was going to come to pass or where we are now in life, thanks to those terrorist attacks? transport Megazord's purpose is just only to send the time flyers into that warp portal, to have the flyers ready for the Rangers to use to face Monster of the Week with the Megazord. I mean, I get the purpose of the time flyers. I wish that they could have operated on their own, but again, given what's in the Sentai footage, you couldn't really do much with this. And also punching the Zords from the butts where the jet exhausts from the back of them are, and because the time jets should have operated on their own because they're like sentient, futuristic flyer ships. And what I also like about the time flyers, I've noticed that when watching Jetman, that the Zords in the Sentai there, given that Jetman was 10 years prior to the Power Rangers equivalent to Time Ranger, that being this, that Jetman Zords are very modeled right after or were inspirations for the Time Flyers in Time Ranger and Time Force. You can see the Time Robo logo once you see the digital instruction map on how they could form the Megazord from mode blue, but not from mode red. In the early episodes, for episodes 3, 4, and 5 with the Megazord transformations, they didn't in later episodes, adapting later Time Ranger episodes, the Zords would have those blue jet streams to them, to show more effect to them doing that. Yeah, you can see the Time Robo logo again once they see that, once they get the Megazord cockpit, they got to put their hands onto those saber grips for the cockpit. Out of all the Megazord cockpits for the post-Zordon era, I actually like the Time Force Megazord cockpit. Very futuristic. I like that. I wish that when we had Gingaman in Lost Galaxy, I wish that, instead of the Galaxy Rangers in individual cockpits, just because, being with their cockpits being inside the Galactazord, I wish that when they also formed their Megazord, the Galaxy Megazord, I wish that, yeah, Matrix move ahead. I just wish that the Galaxy Megazord would allow the Rangers to be in the same cockpit room at once. That was one of the things I didn't like about Lost Galaxy and Gingaman's cockpit stuff, but that, again, lifted from the Sentai footage. Mode Blue was fine. Mode Blue, represents flight and speed, while Mode Red represents strength and power. Actually, of the two forms of the Time Force Megazord, I prefer Mode Red the most, because it's just Mode Red is like its primary. It feels like if there were like, if the Megazord was to be separate, but again, the Megazord has two different formations. Like one side is blue, one side is red, but Mode Blue is very different. Mode Red is different. It feels like what I also loved about this Megazord for so long is it's a 2-in-1 Megazord. Again, post 9/11 editing. Jatara just blasts the Megazord and different shots of the Rangers in the Megazord. And then you get that dumb line of Lucas in the edit with the whole, he's getting ready to fire again. Again, that was not in the original edit. But in the original episode of this, Jatara just takes a chunk of a skyscraper to throw at the Megazord. But again, due to 9/11. Because this episode had some very wary re-editing, because again, if I wish I saw the original edit of this episode again, when this Megazord battle still had the building destruction, well, unfortunately, again, 9/11 happened, so they have to do a bunch of re-editing on following episodes that had all that building destruction. They had to slow-mo that and change the shot of that Megazord just standing like that. But, well, it's very generic. I wish they replaced it with just a random stock explosion shot, which they've been doing a lot constantly to, censor the building destruction present in this season. I also like that once they defeat a monster during a Megazord fight, the mutants just turn back into these action figures into the capsules, because unlike most Ranger series, the Time Force Rangers don't destroy monsters in the Megazord fight, and then when the monster is defeated, they just get captured because they don't have no intentions of killing. It's kind of like the whole Batman doesn't kill rule, and that's what the Time Force Rangers don't do. Same go for SPD. because SPD is another team after these guys where once they defeat a monster of the week, they just, pull out their SPD morph or pull out the judgment mode and then get the verdict of guilty and not guilty, and then arrest the monster, and the monster is in the file card. Katie is so strong with her hugs. Yeah, it's a great end to the episode, but though the post 9/11 edits are still, there's plenty more post 9/11 edits to come, especially when we get into the next episode.